Total Sports Zone. All sports, all action, one zone.
You know, the San Francisco 49ers 2025 season, it was supposed to be the one. It was supposed to end with them hoisting a Lombardi trophy. Instead, it ended with a pretty brutal playoff exit and a whole lot of tough financial questions. Now, with a really tight salary cap and a desperate need for some new talent, the front office has some seriously difficult decisions to make. And really, that's the question, isn't it? When a team that's built to win a championship gets stretched to its absolute limit, the fallout isn't just on the field. It sends shockwaves right into the front office and forces a financial reckoning. So today, we're going to break down exactly who on this roster might end up paying that price. But look, before we even get into who might get cut in 2026, you've got to understand the absolute gauntlet they ran in 2025. It was a season that was really defined by one word: survival. I mean, you look at a 12-5 record and you think, hey, that's a great season, right? And for most teams, it absolutely would be. But for these Niners, that record is hiding a much, much tougher story. Yeah, that record doesn't even begin to tell the whole story. Because that record, it was earned in the middle of an absolute injury nightmare. Now, Christian McCaffrey had an unbelievable, historic comeback player of the year season, but while he was doing that, the rest of the roster was just taking hit after hit. And just look at who they lost. We're not talking about role players here. We're talking about the heart and soul of this team. Brock Purdy was hobbled, missing starts with turf toe. But the real gut punches came on defense, where they lost their two biggest leaders, Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, both gone for the year. Just devastating. And this right here really shows you the split personality of their playoff run. On one hand, you have this incredible, gritty performance. They go on the road and just flat out upset the defending champion Eagles in a tough physical game. But then, the next week, you see the other side of it. They ran into a brick wall in Seattle and got completely dismantled, 41-6. We're talking the second worst playoff loss in franchise history. That game didn't just end their season, it exposed just how thin this roster had become. So yeah, the battle on the field was over. But as we're about to see, a whole new battle was just getting started. And this one's fought on the spreadsheets, against the salary cap. Okay, so this is the number that's causing all the headaches, about $37 million in projected cap space for 2026. Now, that might sound like a pretty big number, but trust me, when you see the holes they have to fill, you'll realize it's nowhere near enough. And here's why that money is going to vanish in a hurry. Look at the shopping list. They need a true number one, an alpha wide receiver, especially with some guys potentially leaving. The D-line needs help behind Bosa. The inside of the O-line was a weak spot, and with George Kittle's injury history, you need more depth at tight end. That $37 million is going to be gone before you know it. Which brings us to our first potential cut candidate, and this one's a big one: wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. And I know, from a pure talent standpoint, this sounds absolutely crazy. But roster building isn't about feelings, right? It's about dollars and cents. And this is the real push and pull with Ayuk. The talent? Oh, it's off the charts. We've all seen the elite plays he can make. But the reality behind the scenes is, well, it's a lot messier. There's been friction with the front office, there's still some worries about his durability, and this is the big one, his 2026 contract guarantees were voided. All of that makes his huge price tag really, really hard to justify. So how do they actually do it? Well, there's this little accounting trick in the NFL called a post-June 1 designation. Basically, it lets the team spread out the financial pain over 2 seasons instead of taking it all at once. It gives them some breathing room right now, and honestly, it just lets them finally turn the page on this whole saga. Okay, let's talk about candidate number 2, edge rusher Bryce Huff. And he's a totally different kind of story. He's what you'd call a classic cap casualty. A guy who was pretty good, just maybe not good enough for what he's getting paid. Look, the idea with Huff was simple. You bring him in, you put him on the other side of Nick Bosa, and he's just going to feast on quarterbacks, right? But the results, it just never quite happened. His impact kind of flattened out. He was okay, but he never became that consistent, disruptive guy they were hoping for. And that's where this number becomes a real problem. A cap hit of about $5.4 million in 2026. For a team that is counting every single penny, that's real money. Money you could definitely use to upgrade another position. You know, one of the sources we looked at put it perfectly. They called him a classic mid-tier cap casualty. And that's exactly what he is. He's productive enough to have on your team, for sure. But when you're in a financial squeeze and you have younger, cheaper guys who might be able to do his job, he just becomes expendable. All right, last but not least, our third candidate, center Jake Brendel. And his story really shines a light on just how brutal the NFL can be, especially when you're an offensive lineman and the age curve starts to catch up with you. Now, don't get me wrong. The 49ers absolutely value Brendel's leadership. He's a veteran voice you need in that locker room. But at the end of the day, you can't ignore the numbers, and the numbers show his pass blocking has been slipping. Pressure up the middle was a huge issue for them in 2025, and at 34 years old, it's just not likely that's going to get better. So releasing him would save the team about $4 million. It's not a blockbuster number like with Ayuk, but hey, when you're trying to patch together a better offensive line, every little bit helps. That's another meaningful piece of the financial puzzle. So look, it's really important to see that these aren't just random, cold-hearted cuts. This is all part of a much bigger strategy, a necessary recalibration to try and balance winning now with staying competitive in the future. And this chart really lays it all out, nice and clean. You can see the potential savings from each guy. Ayuk gives you that huge chunk of flexibility, and then Huff and Brendel add to the pot. When you put it all together, it starts to add up to some real financial breathing room that they desperately need. So when we say recalibrating, what do we actually mean? Well, it's about making those tough calls on veterans to free up cash, for sure. But it's also about opening the door for younger players to step up and, most importantly, reloading the roster to make another legitimate run at a Super Bowl. And that right there is the whole point of this. This isn't just about saving money to save money. It's about strategic reinvestment. You take the money you save from these three guys and you immediately pour it back in to finding those game changers, those alpha playmakers, the guys they were clearly missing when it mattered most. It's that classic idea of addition by subtraction. You know, what the 49ers did in 2025, surviving all those injuries, it proved one thing. Their Super Bowl window is absolutely still open, but it's definitely a little tighter now than it was before. And that leaves us with one big question. To keep that window open, is their biggest battle now fought not on the field, but on the balance sheet?